right. Welcome everyone to the 8th weekly meeting of the Open Metaverse Interoperability Group. Today on the agenda, let me go and share that. Right. Today on the agenda, we've got a recap of our community group charter. We'll talk more about the community virtual space design. Jin, if he shows up, we'll talk about community ops tools. And Evo, I think we talked about Open Collective a little bit last week, but we can push that conversation a little bit forward if we have some time. We have the virtual world URIs spec, and then if we have time, we can talk more about OMI identity. So I'm gonna jump over to the community charter really quick. I just want to make sure that we have one comment here and some comments from the last meeting that still need to be merged into the document. But if anyone would like to go and check out the current draft of the charter, the easiest way is to go to this pull request. You can see it right here, and then you can go to the files changed, and you can view it in this diff format. You can also pretty print it if you go over and see.
And Robert, you made a really good point here about a decision-making process around what we adopt and how we move forward with projects. I think your comment there was really valuable.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, the process document, if anyone hasn't seen that yet, is available on the GitHub as well. It's already published. I'll go back to the home, and then you can see this process.md document. That's where all that. It's also linked down here. But if you click on that, you can see this flowchart, and then I go in and explain all the different subsections there. And this is also, like, as part of the charter, this is something that we want to ratify as well. So if you see things that you want to change in here, you can submit a pull request. I'll make sure that this document, if anyone wants to edit it, I can get the Figma document in there and make sure that it's like published as a part of the repository, the like .fig file. Oh, it is in
Oh,
there.
like a
It
pull
is in there right now.
request?
Okay, so
Yeah.
you can just import this into Figma and edit it. Or you can use whatever other software you want if you want to make it more pretty. Just make sure you recommit the source assets into it.
So we have a week before we're going to vote on ratifying this charter, correct?
Yes, yes, we are going to ratify this on June 23rd. So if you've got additions that you want to make before then, before we get that first draft in, that'd be great. After that period, it becomes a little bit there's more formal process to get the additions in. If I go to the bottom here, amendments to the charter. So after ratification, the group can decide to work on a proposed amended charter, editing the text using the decision process described above. The decision on whether to adopt the amended charter is made by conducting a 30-day vote on the proposed new charter. So if we want to change that, now would be the time. I think 30 days is a bit long here, but as we go forward, we probably want to keep it at 30 days because it allows people with busier schedules to make sure that they have time to respond.
Right. And W3C is a sort of long
Yes.
play group. And so we just want to think of many of these working groups tend to stay together for a number of years and include groups that are very institutionally entrenched more than we are. So that's part of why W3C works in these longer timelines. But yeah, the main thing to notice is that 2/3 of us would need to agree to sort of steer the ship in a different direction after this. So if there are steering questions that you have here or comments that you think would change the direction at all, we definitely want to hear those now or within this next week.
Yep.
Did Robert propose to have that sliding scale for the chair terms?
Yes, so that is I have to add that here, so it's a to-do item here. But the chair terms are in our discussion community group chair nomination. So I'm just going to take this sliding schedule and formalize that. So the next chair election will be August 4th, and so I'll get that in there, and then formalize the dates for 6 months after that, and then it'll move to 1 year.
Getting ourselves a foundation, y'all. Thank you. Do you have any questions? Is anything coming up as you read this?
I don't have any questions, but as someone new who just joined literally 10 minutes ago to the server, this looks great. Honestly, this looks absolutely fantastic.
Are you
Thank
Dylan?
you for coming on after the tweet. I really appreciate you.
That's
jumping
right.
in.
It's from the tweet conversation. Twitter works.
Oh,
It
I
really
see.
does for networking. Yeah. And I've just was curious and I just jumped in. And this is I happened to jump in for this weekly call. And I'm looking
There
at
we
all this
be.
and going, wow, this is really cool. And it's great to see.
And this is Dylan from XR Access that literally just joined the voice call right now.
That's awesome. I think this is actually a natural time to do some introductions. I see we got a couple new people on here. So if you want to take the stage and tell us a little bit about yourselves, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Tom Fisk. I'm the editor of the Immersive Wire, which is a twice weekly newsletter about VR and AR. Kind of my shtick is I like to provide like a 5-minute summary of what happens in the immersive space, just like kind of an email newsletter. I posted more details in the welcome chat, and that also includes a link to what I do. And I talk about the metaverse as well, but between you and me, guys, I mean, like, there's a lot of people who talk about the metaverse online, but they don't actually know what they're talking about. So it's really nice to cut through it sometimes to find people actually trying to build it and knowing what they're talking about. And yeah, and my role is to find those people and talk to them. It's got like, yeah, tell the world about this. It's fascinating.
Awesome. I see a couple other new names. Feel free to hop in and tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Yes. Hello, can you all hear me now?
Yeah.
Awesome. Hi everyone, I'm Dylan. I was just with Nova here over in XR Access. So I'm representing XR Access is a nonprofit that's focused on virtual and augmented reality accessibility. And we found one of the big blockers for us right now is that for so many things, like captions, and just a million other accessibility features, it's kind of well, here's the design guidelines, now go build it from scratch on every platform separately type thing. And Nova suggested this group would be a great place to talk about ways to maybe build out something like captioning once as, for example, an OpenXR plugin, and then let that be useful everywhere. So, really happy to chat with anybody about XR accessibility, and happy to make y'all acquaintance.
It's great to have you here. I very much enjoyed your event last week, Dylan. Thank you so much for bringing that together. And this group, along with W3C's XR Accessibility Working Group, will be great places to dig in and begin to create those kinds of standards and communicate them. I think that there's a large gap in the communication as well as in the development of those capacities as well. So thanks for joining us. Who else do we have that's new today? And Dylan, I think we want to include a little bit of a sort of collab note on XR Access later on in this call today.
Yeah, I'd be happy to post a link to a few of our things. If I don't know which channel would be appropriate for that here.
Community development is probably a great place to start, and then we're going to continually develop out those channels to match our interoperability focus.
It's a good idea. Okay, I want to also quickly just over because I kind of threw Dylan in here though, and for all the new people. So, OMI, what we mean by the metaverse is we mean a collection of basically interoperable worlds. The idea is that we will help to create standards, or at the very least, we will help to create sort of a list of all of the things that need to be connected amongst different virtual worlds, though. We'll put them in standards, we'll test them, and we'll help map out certain things, though. Right? So, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. That's good context, because I am, definitely running behind on terms of the interoperability information.
Awesome. Did anyone else want to introduce themselves?
Hey, I'm Lachlan. I'm just popping in to see what's up. I work on open standards like OpenXR and WebXR. I'm at Microsoft currently, but not representing Microsoft. Just being myself. Hey, how's it going?
Awesome.
Nice to meet you.
Cool. Anyone else?
Hey, I'm Shaw.
Hi, Shaw.
How's it going?
Cool. I think we can move on to our next item then. So Jesse made a proposal for this virtual space. We talked about it a little bit right before the meeting. This is like a place for us to meet, hang out, and use as like kind of like a creative sort of project for us to work on as a group. We've been discussing different platforms to make this for, but also just like we need to discuss what sort of asset we're going to produce and how we're going to get it into different platforms. Personally, I think it would be really great if we created something that we could use in a multitude of platforms, since that is, the interoperability sort of mindset that we have here. It'd be really cool if we could make potentially like a GLTF asset that we could then export out to use in hubs or in VR chat or wherever else. We could have our interoperable home space that we could, bridge across multiple metaverses. That would be pretty cool.
Stargate Lounge, so to speak.
Yeah, there we go. So.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was going to add on that one of the biggest points of where XR Access and OMI would intersect is the communication methods amongst people, though. If someone's blind and the other person is deaf, then obviously you need to establish a communication channel between them, though, that will work. Across different languages, you have to establish a communication channel that will work. These things don't exist yet. It exists where OMI exists, though, and it intersects with XR Access heavily. So I think that should be our main, at least initially, I think that's the main point of contact to where they both intersect. So.
Is there some pointers to where to get started on that? You can like link.
I haven't really heard anyone talking about it. Earlier in OMI, we were talking about how if we're chatting with somebody else across the world, though, then we would have to do translation services. Or if somebody's trying to do, for example, sign language, the other person may not understand that. And as much as it would be nice for everyone to learn ASL or something like that, it's just not realistic. So we were talking about that earlier. It wasn't documented, I don't think. But
The XR Accessibility Working Group has some pieces of that puzzle, and we should definitely fit them into it, as well as some of the global. I think when we're talking about interoperability, we're also talking about internationalization, and some of those things are going to overlap. For example, when we collaborate with the Japanese and the Koreans, because language is a factor on a number of these issues. Thank you for bringing up the accessibility portion of this as well, in terms of making sure that whatever space we create, whether it's captioned or provides text chat as well as voice chat, there are certain sort of baseline accessibility features we want to see in our collaborative space. But Matthew, you had some really great questions here. So yes, this is a space for collaboration, discussion, hanging out, and to experiment, right? To potentially connect between spaces and run lightweight experiments that we can document. So what makes the space a better alternative? We need a multi-dimensional space or more than one that we can figure out how to connect effectively, right? So some of the experiments we need to run need to be done independently, and it needs to be more than just Zoom or Discord. And then I think you've got some very interesting questions about media frames and video texture targets and sort of the ways this media nests. And that might help us determine which platforms we need to be in, right? Like we know hubs, we know what hubs can do. Robert, you had listed at the beginning of this page some other potential platform options. I think Jesse had mentioned as well. Examples like Simulacra, right? When you're thinking of collaborative spaces for a group like ours to run these kinds of experiments, what comes like? What direction do y'all want to go in? Do you want to just think about a WebXR experience that's very simple and lightweight? Or do we want something that's fully media enabled and ready to roll?
I think we should start from a base so that there's like a initial level that all platforms can achieve to, and then add like special things. Like I recall that video streaming is actually hard if you're not on the website, on a web browser.
And every platform deals with streaming differently. So some will take a YouTube, some won't. Some will, work with certain RTMP and others and not. It's very inconsistent from one world to the next.
And YouTube requiring like YouTube API keys by begging Google is kind of difficult.
Yeah, no, we don't want to even bother with that, but we do want to figure out like good RTMP multicasting is one of the sort of interoperability goals to run expansive virtual events. Being able to run the same RTMP across multiple worlds is important.
Yeah, for those who don't know, that's like how you do like a simulcast video stream in multiple spaces. So if we were all trying to watch the WebXR awards as a group, then we could have a simultaneous stream in spaces in multiple hubs rooms, or a hubs room and a gel room and a VR chat room, for example. So you could get that video stream into multiple spots, or stream between the different spaces, things like that. That's, I think, yeah, a great example of like one of those things that is going to be very platform dependent, how you set up streaming video. So maybe focusing on the lowest common denominator of like the space, and then working up from there for each specific platform that we want to support, or that a user wants to take the time to implement for this, makes a lot of sense.
So there are multiple roles here. There's design of objects, design of space, and then there's also implementation, right? So if you want to be the person who brings us into your world of choice, VR chat or any, platform that you feel would be a valuable place for us to be collaborating, we probably need to get like a top 3 or top 5 platforms list as well, Robert, just so that we have a narrower focus. There's just so many places we can go with this.
Yeah,
So,
but
do we have? Sorry, go ahead.
I think rather than trying to list our top 3, because this is going to be largely volunteer based, it'd be really great to just hear if there are people interested in doing that implementation sort of projects, like which platforms are they interested in working on. For example, I would do a hubs implementation. I'm not a creative person, but I would love to just mess around and sculpt with some assets and create a hub space.
So we got a champion, Robert, for hubs. I think we should have one for VR chat, but I am not the champion for that one.
Yeah, I feel you. I don't know that I want to deal with VR chat.
VR chat is the,
yeah,
VR chat is the most popular, I think. I don't have the numbers.
And for avatar interoperability, we're going to want to play in VR chat, but it may not be our first build.
I think there's
Well,
probably
it's
some
definitely not going to
people.
be the first one.
I think there's some people in our community who would really appreciate it though. So we can bring this up in a asynchronous manner, and I can ping some people. For example, Rainwolf, who just joined our community recently, is very interested in that space and has a lot of connections in the creator community there. So there could be a possibility of that.
For context, VR chat on a Saturday night will have like 30 to 40,000 people online every day. You know, concurrent users. So they're probably larger than every other VR and XR sort of experience combined right now for social. But we also have had a hard time kind of reaching out and connecting to them for anything interoperable.
Right. I think this is kind of like a really good introduction to some of the things that we're looking into and could be a really good outreach mission.
Yep.
So.
I think our roadmap should be something like hubs, gel, frame, Neos, VR chat. Sort of go up the ladder a bit, you know, in terms of how indie they are.
I think that having VR chat, hubs, and then some other one maybe narrow the list. I'm not sure what the last one is.
The XR Engine team is very committed to this, and we have engineers to put on it.
Who is that again?
Definitely a good start.
Our project is called XR Engine.
Yes. I'm sorry. I was trying to see who was speaking.
Oh, sorry, this is Shaw.
Hi, Shaw. That's great. And yeah, no, I love your engine. I think it should be included in this mix.
Cool. Well, yeah, we got engineers to focus on this, and I think we can kind of build. I think that people like VR Chat will start paying attention once they're seeing interoperable value from some of our other smaller groups.
I went into another meeting in Immerse Space. I think there are a couple of these indie platforms that are going to be our easy solutions for the first round. And then we can kind of, as Nova said, just step up in complexity as we go. There are definitely some worlds that are already not going to play well with us. But then there are some that we can kind of hack and make our own, like Roblox, that doesn't really care. And as long as we do it independently, they won't mind. So there's just a matter of working within worlds without necessarily having permission to do so.
Is there a candidate that is like, let's say, required like a mobile via XR? Let me try it again. It requires like Quest to compatibility.
Yeah, I think Immerse is based on hubs, so theoretically, you get one, you could probably port that in like an hour to the other, and all of these WebGL ones will work with the Quest 2.
Yep, we just need to make sure that the space has a reasonable poly count and a low number of materials.
Yep.
Getting closer to a spec. I love where this is going. You said a few of you were interested in maybe creating assets. Feel free to identify yourselves in the Discord this week if you're interested in participating in one particular piece of the puzzle, whether that's design or implementation.
Cool.
Hey, this is Dylan. Just wanted to throw something in there. The idea, one of the things we've been talking about in the accessibility space is the accessibility object model, and where we would include things like, hey, what should a screen reader, read out here? What metadata should there be that we would want to surface to assistive technologies? I don't know if that's something that would be relevant here, but being able to ideally apply alt text to an object once and then have it be translate across whatever formats that shows up in is definitely something that we'd be interested in making.
Absolutely important.
I think this is the best part about having our own space, is the ability to have a showcase for everything we care about in VR.
Also,
for the record, though, I think that with the whole model, you can basically, sorry, it's a bit of a tangent, but I think it was important to say before I forget, multiple different levels of captioning. So like you have a caption for the whole object, like that's level 0. Then you can have level 1 where you basically have like, simple components, and then you can sort of have sub levels to where it gets more and more detailed of object captioning. Right, sorry. Anyway,
Yeah, no, it's true. I think you can go really deep, right? Because also we're just talking that there might be, hundreds or thousands of objects in a scene. God help your poly count if it's thousands, but there's needs to be some type of metadata around, okay, is this an interactable object? Is this a UI component? Is this something that's important versus just set dressing, right? Being able to communicate that stuff
Oh, that
intelligently.
reminds me.
Yeah, the semantics to screen readers would be really important.
If someone's blind, they don't need to render any polygons.
Ah, there you go.
But they need to be specialized, and in theory, they can hear things.
Yes, obviously, but like, I mean, if you don't have vision, then there's no point in rendering it.
Well, I mean, there's partial blindness as well too. We
Yes, that is
talked
true. And
about
at that point, though, you might be able to get away with the lower level of detail or such.
yeah.
But like, yeah,
We've talked
I mean,
about
it's
this a bit
adjustable.
on the hubs team, and another good community to reach out to is the GLTF working group, because they've been starting to attach metadata to objects within scenes, and that's probably a good place for us to like start looking into. They have a new spec which I contribute a little bit to. That's based on it's what XMP, which is like an Adobe standard for adding metadata to media, and it could possibly be used for uh, adding screen reader support. I think there's probably some more targeted standards that we could use though.
Can you
So,
like
yeah.
this? And I'm
It's
curious, does it require like artists to put accessibility, like alt text for every single object in the entire world?
um, so XMP is pretty generic. It's for attribution was what we were originally looking at, but you can basically tag sub objects of a GLTF. Sorry, this isn't exactly the most descriptive document. It doesn't really have any graphics, and if you don't know the GLTF spec, it's not very informative. But essentially, you can tag different 3D objects within a GLTF file with metadata. So you could say this is a duck, or this is the floor, or this is a screen that you can put media into, things like that. So you can have screen reader hints for that. But yeah, there's a lot more work that needs to be put into this other than just like, oh, we can add some metadata to it. We need to be more descriptive of what those things actually mean semantically to a screen reader, or what even is a 3D screen reader. So similar to the ARIA guidelines for the web, you kind of need to start looking into what you can do for the 3D spaces.
And we have, I was just going to say, we have a couple of people that are interested in defining exactly how the semantics of that would work. A connection with the XR Association, which is, it has a bunch of ins with Google and Microsoft and so on and so forth, that are interested in making that work. So I'm happy to serve as a bridge there if there's community development that's being done.
What I'm imagining is some sort of like like in the future, it's like a mandatory like tagging of the spaces, kind of like how websites need accessibility built into it. But that's in the future.
Yep. Cool. I want to move us forward to our next item. It doesn't look like Jin's here, but I'm gonna go over it a little bit. So Jin's been doing a bunch of research in the crypto space, particularly around DAOs, and also just around like Discord bots in general. And he'd like to give a presentation on some of the findings from that sort of space, as well as just like how we might use moderation tools within our own community. So we need to set up a date and time for this, and then we'll probably run this separately from this meeting so that we can give Jen the proper amount of time and the correct space to do all this sort of stuff. But if anyone's interested, that discussions available on our GitHub, and you can chime in there. And then we'll give Jen some space to talk more about it at the next meeting if he's in attendance. All right. And then we have the Open Collective. We started talking about this last week. Evo, do you want to talk a little bit more about that? We can give like a little bit of a recap.
I'm unmuting. Yeah, it's really very simple. Open Collective is a toolkit of resources for open source groups like ours that provides fiscal accountability and transparency. So as we deal with finances, having a solution that everyone can look at and contribute to feels vital. And this is the most open and accessible solution that I found for open source communities. So I would love, if any of you have experience using Open Collective, I would love to hear it. I have not had a direct relationship with them. I've only heard through the grapevine that they've been great for communities like ours. So if there's any thoughts on that, we need to do an application process to get in their door. But then they would also be our fiscal sponsor. So then we would not need to necessarily apply for any sort of nonprofit status right now because it would be wrapped in through Open Collective. That would allow us to take grants and do bigger projects without necessarily needing the overhead of an organization to run on our own. Are there any questions about what Open Collective is, or anyone's questions and thoughts on how it might work for us?
Question. Do you want the ability for OMI to charge for things and make profit of it?
Profit, not necessarily. Being able to create events that are supportive of the community makes sense, but having profit go back into the organization to do more work, right? Whether that's community development work, that's, you know, events. I think there's there's potential in publishing and in publications to socialize some of the solutions, for example, in accessibility. There's a number of different projects we can do if we have the funding in the door. But profit isn't really the thought there.
Well, profit in this case means greater, you get back more than you spent to do it.
Right. Right. Being able to bring in more assets that can then be brought back into the community to do more. Absolutely. But thinking of it as a nonprofit and keeping the funds circulating in the community, for example, for small development grants and things like that as well.
Because there's some types of organizations that cannot allow that, and I'm just bringing this up.
Right. This, as a nonprofit, you can have a social benefit and a social profit as long as you're accounting for it, right? So if we were able to generate funds, we might decide to create a grant program for development or something along those lines.
Yeah, and especially maybe funding people like the organizers of the group, and also any projects we wanted to spend our effort on and is in our chart.
Right. So operating at an open source and as a nonprofit, roughly, in the sense of we're not here to make profit, right? It is really sort of a nonprofit community group at this stage. And also looking at down the road, we can sprout off other endeavors. So early on, we talked about, Robert and Jesse and I talked about groups like OpenAI. And OpenAI has 3 separate organizations. We can, down the road, grow into a larger organization that has multiple branches or multiple organizations, but we need a place to start. And so this gives us a place to start that's accountable, that's easy to see, transparent, and relatively standardized across the industry.
Shah, I brought up the XR Foundation, but you and the XR Engine folks have already started using Open Collective. Do you want to speak a little bit about your experience with them?
Yep. We've been a little bit, we're still figuring all of it out. Basically, it is not like it's a 501c(d), so people are able to donate to you, but they are not able to write it off their taxes. So we're trying to figure out kind of like what's the path to being like a full nonprofit. And so they actually have a separate they have like the open source foundation. It's like it's also part of their thing, but you have to apply to it. But I think that there's a lot of business benefit there because you know, eventually we want to get the big boys to come play, you know, the Apples and the Googles and whatever. And you know, I think there's a lot of thinking about how people can write off their taxes basically by donating to this and making it something that they can actually make as a strong argument to their business for why they should be involved. And a lot of our thinking is like, well, if we're giving all this code as a public good to anybody who wants to use this, then it makes sense that everybody's kind of pooling their resources and minimizing. And like, I'm always trying to think about how can we appeal to the idealist, but also the skeptic in any business or any group trying to interop. I think it's a really big, the game theory of this is really complex, and it requires getting a lot of people on teams on board where they're like, well, how are we making money on this? That's been such a fundamental problem for companies working with companies. So we're trying, so we're trying to think of these kinds of things of like, how do we make this a full nonprofit, make it something where people feel like they're part of a public good that also then they can take back to their operations person and be like, see, and we're, you know, whatever. And a lot of software runs this way. A lot of you know, tech corporations are writing a lot of things off into fund kind of development projects this way. So I don't know. That's kind of been our experience. That's the angle I think about.
I will say for XR Access, what we ended up doing is basically becoming a center of Cornell Tech. Because Cornell had, you know, their whole setup for nonprofits. We ended up kind of jumping into that machinery. So that could be another route if you find an organization or an institution that runs nonprofits that your goals align with.
Yeah.
Right. So a
That's
fiscal
easy path.
sponsor could be any number of types of organizations. Open Collective has a fiscal sponsor, but they are certainly not the only one. They take 10%, which is a little much. However, they do provide a lot of online transparency that other tools don't.
And you can apply for their other fiscal sponsor, which is a 501c3, and I think it's still the same 10% deal though. But at
Right,
least
it is. It's a 10% deal, which most fiscal sponsors take 6 to 12. So it's in line with the rest of the industry.
Yeah, but if you're thinking about, you know, you're a group that wants to minimize the cost of this, it's like, well, you can write it all off your taxes. You know, for a lot of businesses, that's like kind of, you know, it washes out. 10% ends up being, you know, fine.
We're not going to see like 3%. We're going to see somewhere between 7 and 12 with any org. Most of them take at least 5 anyway. It's just the processing.
Well, yeah, I mean, the other route would be that you have to start your own 501c3, and that would probably be way beyond the scope.
Right, it takes a year to do that, and we're not going to bother with that right now until there's $100 grand plus in the bank to maintain an org effectively. So yeah, figuring out step one. We can make a decision on this next week and then move forward. Does that sound appropriate? Does anyone have any questions or comments or things that we need to include? We should maybe, Robert, think about a separate channel in the OMI Discord for these kinds of organizational development questions, because they're separate from some of the other like community development.
Yeah, I originally thought it was going to be in the community development, but that makes sense. Yeah, we'll do. I'll speak to you afterwards about the best naming of that channel, but yeah, we'll get that set up.
Thanks everyone for your thoughts. If there's any other questions on, or if any of you have any great experiences or tools that you think we should be looking at, either drop them in the Discord or drop us a line.
Cool. I want to add one thing I forgot to put on the agenda, but it's a little cool update. A journalist at the New York Times wants to mention us a little bit in a piece that they're writing about the broad definition of the metaverse. I think it's really a cool opportunity for us to, you know, insert ourselves into the discussion. There's been, you know, Kavya Perlman was just on 60 Minutes last week talking about metaverse. There was a bunch of other metaverse founders on there. this conversation is really starting mostly because of NFTs, but also because of like Fortnite and Roblox and all of these digital worlds just kind of like growing in popularity. But I just want to make sure that I'm capturing the essence of this group and trying to give the Times Reporter like an accurate depiction of what we believe as a group, which is a little bit pressed for time, but I want to echo a little bit of what Nova was saying earlier, which is just that we're talking about the metaverse as uh, interoperability between worlds, bridging different virtual worlds. Not so much, a single platform owned by a corporation, but all of these different virtual worlds owned by separate entities, all communicating with each other. Yeah.
Kavya and you were on this, I want to say, I think he's gone now, but Tom Fisk was on this conversation on Twitter as well. Kavya was saying that you cannot have the metaverse without interoperability. And I think that's a really important point that might be lost in everybody else's PR.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Yeah,
That's
I
the
think
number one thing we have to drive home. Anytime anyone says that we've created a metaverse, they're wrong, because no one corporation, no one entity can ever create the entirety of the metaverse. That's like the big key that we have to drive home above all else, and that we are the ones that are trying to make the glue between everything so that we can create a true metaverse instead of everyone, Like, I think we just have to flat out hard reset that term, because like we're not getting anywhere with everybody saying we made a metaverse, because like
No, you made
I guess
universe.
Here's the thing.
I wanted to make a point that if we have so many things that we want to push as our message, we want to be clear which things we want to say.
Yep.
I guess, how do I put it? The inherent indication of the word metaverse is basically, meta and universe. The problem is that the universe is seen as everything there is. Every time a platform says they are a metaverse, they're basically saying we are all that there is in a person's life. And we are basically like, technically metaverse at its most literal is universe of universes. So, I mean, any way you look at it, using the word metaverse for an individual platform does not,
Yeah, I completely hear you. And I think the key for our group is the word interoperability, because that is the word that is lost in everyone else's conversation.
Right.
But the word open is important. The word interoperability is essential, and it's often lacking, right? No one's having that conversation, and that's why we exist.
And I think I totally agree. I just think that in order to properly drive home interoperability, we have to redo the term metaverse. We have to get it out there, because it's, how do I put it? The reason why I think it's so important is because the way that word metaverse is structured indicates instinctively to a lot of people that this is an entire universe. This is everything there is. So I think it's crucial that we basically say, no, this is what metaverse actually means. Then we can get people's minds they think about the question from a different perspective. They don't think about, Epic is making every single piece of content I ever care to interact with. Instead, it's, Epic is making a few pieces of content I want to interact with.
That's great.
Yeah, so if I can jump in with a metaphor, just from listening to the conversation today, it sounds like, yes, there are different, I guess, metaverses as planets. There's all these different planets people can go visit. And right now, if you're on a planet, you're stuck on that planet, you're stuck in that metaverse. What you guys are trying to build here is a rocket ship so that you can kind of visit between the different planets, but still kind of have your, stuff with you, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah. I mean, the terminology...
Go for it. Go for it.
Sorry, I was just gonna say that the terminology that I've seen in general, at least the people who founded OMI use, is that metaverse is basically the sum of all of the platforms interoperating with each other, right? Sort of an emergent property of all those platforms interoperating. Platforms are the individual tiny pieces, though, like Epic as a platform, you know, obviously Roblox as a platform, etc. Right? And then inside of those platforms, you can have worlds. So I just want to kind of lay out the terminology that a lot of us have been using.
Yeah.
Really
planets.
should decide on the
Like a
standard. We
layperson.
should decide on a standard terminology. Like I know everybody's all. We should really let people use the words they're most comfortable with, but like eventually it just leads to communication breakdown. So we really got to do something about it.
Get really sharp about our language and maybe put something on the GitHub with the definitions that we feel most comfortable with in the broadest possible way. I think that's really important for galvanizing some of these conversations. But Robert, I was wondering, this also touches on the addressability, right? The URIs and all of the sort of thinking of the universe and how we begin to find our way around it, which is part of our work here as well. I know that we don't have a lot of time to jump into that, but would you give us just a brief moment of vision on the virtual world URIs and how you see that sort of potentially being this sort of one piece of the glue that we're creating?
Yeah, we're actually thinking less on the URIs front now and more thinking on the metadata front. So being able to get some more information on a particular virtual world is really important if you want to be able to link between them. So we're leaning on existing methods of referencing virtual worlds, but that reference, like a URL or a VR chat world ID, is not very descriptive in itself. So you need to be able to say, well, here's a 360 image that captures the space that you're about to start teleporting to, or here is some information about like what you might find on the other end of this portal. So there's stuff like that, but then it's also really important to have this information in the same way that we have metadata about web pages. You want to be able to crawl the web and understand the structure of the web. So this sort of metadata allows us to like start getting information of like, okay, how is the web of virtual worlds, the metaverse, structured? So yeah.
That's the metadata conversations happening in the web finger on the Discord channel, right?
It
OMI
is.
web
We
finger.
might want to change that to world metadata because
Okay,
it'll
so
be
we
more.
may do some renaming of these conversations in our Discord this week so that I think everything's easier to find.
Yep, we do that fairly often, and it's maybe a little bit hard to keep track of. So I'm also maintaining. I just did this last week. The OMI About page now has a little bit more information about how to get involved and just kind of the structure of like all of our different social accounts and things like that. So we'll keep that up to date. Make sure you check on there if you haven't already.
I could see Dylan's work. Mr. Fox here at XRXs could be extremely beneficial to that metadata conversation. Are there others here who are interested in that conversation who haven't been a part of it yet?
I want to add, is there like a ready-made like badge we can put like for accessibility in this proposal? Like VR only needs something like that, subtitle, stuff like that.
I think it'd be good to tag features that have accessibility applications. I think you'll probably find it's most of them. I think that a lot of this semantic information kind of forms the underpinning of letting assistive systems work with things just as much as letting other kind of multiverse systems work with them. So I think it's something that you could probably put throughout. But if there are parts where, for example, for screen readers specifically, such and such would be useful, definitely tag that for accessibility. And I'm gonna have to drop shortly here, but I would definitely encourage everyone to come check out. We have an XR Access Slack. We have a monthly accessible development of XR work stream that I think Nova is certainly a part of, and I think we're probably going to try to start developing some stuff that takes advantage of what y'all are doing. So it'd be great to have your input there. I posted a link in the introductions to our Slack workspace on our website.
Awesome.
Another way of saying this is we request like a list of accessibility tags that we would like to put into here.
Are you thinking about tagging it in terms
Think of like a TV show, and like you go to a TV show, there's like closed captioning, there's age limits, and like stuff like that. That's kind of what I'm thinking about. It's like a little badge on the top right corner when you enter a world or something.
Oh, I see. So like label a world that, you know, as accessible or not accessible.
Yeah, and maybe avatars if we can figure out what that is.
Interesting. Good question. I think it's probably going to be, I could see for something like avatars, you know, whether or not it's going to be accessible. And again, screen reader is a very narrow view of looking at accessibility, but some of the stuff is just going to depend, you know, how consistently have people added alt text and that metadata, right? I think it's less going to be an either this world is, you know, on, off, yes, it's available or it's not, and more a, you know, quality of like, you know, did you add any alt text? Did you add descriptive alt text? Did you properly label things? You know, if you're looking at it from an assistive tech point of view, there's a whole scorecards you can do of like, okay, are your buttons actually buttons? Are they properly labeled with what they do? You know, are your links descriptive? It's definitely something where if you look at, like, for example, the Axe accessibility checkers, they'll scan a website and then make a list of, okay, well, here, this doesn't have alt text, this is low contrast. Having a tool that could do that, like a virtual world accessibility checker, would be amazing. I don't know how you would even start to put it together, but I'd love that.
And where I
You would do
wanted
it
to
by you would just make a robot. You just make a bot effectively that drops you into the world. It then can use the OpenXR captioning APIs and sort of, you know, analyze it. It's a lot like the accessibility analyzers we have for the web. It's just that we can't examine every element individually. So there will have to be some stuff fudged. Maybe we can use neural networks that have open data in order to sort of evaluate things, right?
it could
and so
also
on.
be self put, like you can put it yourself and you're like saying I abide by trying to do this.
Yeah, I think there's definitely different ways to indicate that, you know, hey, we're accessibility friendly. I think the ones for web don't necessarily require, you know, neural networks or anything like that. They kind of just run down the structure of the web page, right? They go through the HTML and check it, and then they kind of do a visual scan and check it.
That's unfortunately, that's not really a thing we can do in most native apps or even most web apps, because like half the A-frame apps you come across don't even let you see the A-frame scene. So, I mean, the thing is though, is that with increased optimization comes decreased flexibility inherently. So no matter what, we will have to develop something that is not just your typical scanning all the elements in a particular space or page. So,
I'd
but
love
at the
to-
very least though, okay, go ahead.
You finish your thought.
I was just gonna say that we should probably have that be part of OMI and XR Access and so on and so forth. We really need a collaborative effort to create sort of the de facto standard of all of what this should be for a virtual space. This is the minimum that this should be. And then maybe XR Access can say, hey, we reviewed this, certified stamp from us. Right? OMI can basically say, hey, we've reviewed this, certified stamp from us. You need trademarks in order to make that happen or something like that. So, yeah.
I was gonna say, I'd love to continue this conversation, especially with some more maybe some other folks from the GLTF community, and some other folks from around the XR accessibility community. There's a lot of prior work done here, and I think getting the right technical groups into the room with some accessibility folks is really gonna help move this forward. So I'll see what I can do in setting some of that up. I do want to note that we're at time, a little bit over. So if you have to head out, that's no worries. We're going to continue the conversation, but we're going to have the next weekly meeting, same time next week. Reminder that we are ratifying the community charter next week. So if you haven't taken a look at that already, make sure you do so. Submit any updates or any pull request additions before then. We'll get that chair election process added to there right away. And yeah, have a great week, and we'll see you next time at the same time. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording there, but we can continue the discussion.